She was just 20 years old when she vowed to love her husband until grave. No one expected those words to take on such a literal meaning. The story of Vera Renczi is full of passion, obsession, and mysterious disappearances. Every man who entered her life became part of a dark pattern, one that often ended in tragedy. They called her the Black Widow, a woman whose love could lead to dramatic consequences. But who was she really? And why did so many people around her suddenly vanish? Dark File, chilling true stories. Vera Renczi reacted quickly. It didn't take much. An innocent smile sent to another woman, a flirtatious glance, or a tender word. Whenever even a shadow of doubt crept into Vera's mind, her unfaithful lovers soon ended up in zinc coffins. Police would later discover 35 such gruesome mementos in the basement of her home. The Black Widow claimed, until the end of her days, that she murdered all her loved ones out of love. This is the story of a woman who loved to kill. Not much is actually known about her life. Documents and photographs were lost in the turmoil of war. Not even her real surname has survived. The names of her victims, the dates, and the places have long been swallowed by the darkness of history. Yet, from the few fragments that remain, it's still possible to sketch a portrait of Vera Renczi, a woman driven to crime by morbid jealousy, and whose panic-stricken fear of loneliness kept her from parting with her loved ones, even after death.
She was born in 1895 into a family of Romanian-Hungarian aristocrats. Living in Bucharest, her family knew no poverty. From an early age, little Vera was the center of attention. Her wealthy parents fulfilled her every whim. While her peers were starving, she feasted on cookies brought especially for her from Vienna. She never had to ask twice. She simply didn't know the meaning of the word no.
The situation changed dramatically when her mother died. Grief-stricken, her father sold the family estate and decided to leave Bucharest. The 13-year-old noblewoman relocated with him to a stately family villa in the town of Bečkerek, known today as Zrenjanin, in northern Serbia. There, her father became increasingly absorbed in his work. He no longer had the time or energy to dote on his only child as he once had. Accustomed to being the center of attention, Vera reacted with rage. She couldn't accept that she was no longer the most important person in his life. Her resentment grew especially fierce toward any woman her father tried to build a future with.
It's probably just adolescence, some might have said. She'll grow out of it, gain some perspective.
But the line was crossed when something happened that would be described years later in the American Weekly magazine.
One day, a dog was found dead in the garden of the family home. When her father asked why, Vera refused to answer. Only the threat of punishment made her speak. With tears in her eyes, she confessed she had poisoned the animal. Stunned, her father asked why. The answer chilled him to the bone.
I killed him because last night I overheard you say you wanted to give him away to the neighbor, since his barking kept you up at night. And I don't want my dog to belong to anyone else. If he's leaving me, then he's leaving this world too.
The jokes were over. And so was her father's patience. In 1910, the 15-year-old aristocrat was cut off from the family estate and sent to an all-girls boarding school. There, she was meant to learn how to control her outbursts of anger and jealousy, and how to conduct herself like a proper young lady. But as it would later turn out, the lessons had little effect. Morbid jealousy would remain Vera Renczi's most defining trait for the rest of her life.
Instead of etiquette and restraint, the boarding school introduced her to a life she had never known before, a life she quickly grew to love. She became a woman seemingly overnight. First, it was students from the nearby grammar school. Then came a teacher. Then bankers, military officers, foreign businessmen. The list of lovers only grew longer. Her preferences shifted too, toward older, wealthier men.
They showered her with expensive gifts. She gave them her heart. With each new man, Vera fell madly, obsessively in love. But they rarely returned that love. Eventually, they all grew tired of her. They lied, they cheated, and then they left. But Vera Renczi wasn't going to let that happen anymore. She was going to find a way to make the one she loved stay with her forever, and she did.
She wasn't even 20 years old when she married for the first time. Her husband, Carl Schenk, was 40 years her senior, and very wealthy. After the wedding, the newlyweds moved in together, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. But the happy times ended shortly after the birth of their son, Lorenz. The spell faded. Vera was still young and in love, but her older husband had grown bored. He began casting flirtatious glances toward other women. The situation only worsened after they moved into Vera's family home in Bechkarek, following her father's death. There, the Austrian banker quickly became a rising star in the city's elite circles. He gained popularity not just among the wealthy men, but among their wives as well. And then one day, Carl Schenk vanished without a trace.
Vera had no trouble convincing her friends to believe the version of events she told them.
That scoundrel left me alone with a small child. Oh, and he left a suicide note too. Said he couldn't handle family life anymore.
About a year later, she found a replacement. The new object of her affection was a young Serbian lawyer named Joseph.
Damn it! I can't get married again. I'm still officially married.
She needed either a divorce or a death certificate from her husband. Brad Steiger, in his book Real Vampires, Night Stalkers, and Creatures from the Dark Side, described how Vera achieved her goal. Soon there was nothing stopping her from changing her name from Schenk to Renczi.
Vera began dressing in black. With tears in her eyes, she told friends that her beloved husband had died in a car accident, just after sending word that he was planning to return to her. Local officials believed the grieving young widow and issued the document she so desperately wanted.
With that, nothing stood in the way of her becoming Vera Renczi. A few weeks later, Joseph moved into her estate. But after the wedding, it turned out that Mr. Renczi was even more susceptible to the charms of other women than her previous husband. Joseph didn't know how to say no to beautiful ladies, and very quickly he shared the same fate as his predecessor. Another bereavement, and more stories about a tragic accident. But this time, the woman's grief was laced with anger and seething jealousy. How dare they seek carnal pleasures in the arms of other women? How could they betray her? They belonged only to her. She had given them her heart. Didn't they know that she never forgives?
Those who sympathized with her over the loss of two husbands had no idea that both Carl and Joseph were still with her. They now rested side by side in the basement of her home, sealed inside zinc coffins. Because from Vera Renczi, no one simply walked away.
She no longer needed a second divorce. Disillusioned by her previous marriages, Vera decided never to marry again. But that didn't mean giving up the company of men. She loved being adored, being loved, and deep down, she still believed that one day she'd find someone who would truly reciprocate her feelings. Young or old, it made little difference. Vera followed just one rule. Her lovers couldn't be locals. A few of her suitors were brought in from faraway places like Vienna. The fewer people around her knew them, the fewer questions were asked when they suddenly disappeared under mysterious circumstances.
Describing the case in 1925 for the Berlin branch of United Press International, future Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Otto Tilicius wrote,
Some men stayed with her for a month, others for a week. There were even those she kept for just a few days. She never chose men from her neighborhood. All those she invited came from far away. And when they vanished, she would simply say that she told them to leave, and they did.
Years passed. More lovers came and went, and the city buzzed with gossip. Some saw her as a refined femme fatale, playing with men and discarding them like gloves. Others, more sympathetic, believed she was simply a grieving woman, still searching for true love after the tragic loss of her husbands, only to be constantly betrayed and abandoned by one heartless seducer after another.
Vera Renczi had a strict preference for bachelors. She wanted no rivals, no wives, no mistresses, no one to compete for her lover's attention. She was careful, extremely careful. No one around her ever noticed that once a man entered her home, he was never seen again. The slightest sign of boredom or disinterest was a death sentence. There were no second chances. Their bodies, lifeless, ended up in her basement, joining the ranks of her former lovers, sealed away in zinc coffins. Her grim collection grew steadily, and likely would have continued to do so for years, if not for one critical mistake. At 30 years old, the Black Widow of Bechkarek let her guard down. She believed a new suitor when he claimed he was single.
Mr. Milorad was a Serbian banker in his 50s. He claimed that he had never married. He assured that during his many travels in Austria-Hungary, not even a glance in the direction of other women was on his mind. Every time he appeared in Bechkarek, he assured that he would soon sell his estate in Sarajevo and settle here permanently. The time they spent together, the expensive gifts, the walks and candlelit dinners together strengthened Vera's conviction that their love would last forever. Once again, she gave her whole heart away. She was soon to bitterly regret it.
Mr. Milorad was not who he claimed to be. In truth, his name was Leonard Patsic, and he was from Belgrade. He told his wife that he was forced to leave on a business trip and would return in a few days. Vera heard the same from him.
Neither woman even guessed that the banker was leading a double life. He, in turn, did not know that his wife had a relative in Bechkarek, from whom she received a letter in early 1925 saying that she had seen Leonard in her town. The man was to be accompanied on his walk by a wealthy local widow of dubious reputation.
Upon his return to Belgrade, he received an ultimatum from his wife, either her or his lover. The banker chose his wife, apologized for his infidelity, asked for forgiveness, and promised to go to Mrs. Renczi one last time to honorably announce the end of their affair. Mrs. Paksic then saw him for the last time. When he did not return on the agreed date, the wife decided to find her husband. This is how she ended up at the estate of Vera Renczi, who assured her that she had never seen the man described. However, all circumstantial evidence indicated that she was responsible for her husband's disappearance.
Concerned, Mrs. Pacic informed the local police of her suspicions. The officers openly admitted that they had already received signals about the men's disappearance and the rich widow's alleged connection to it, but could do nothing. Vera Renczi had money, influence, and high social standing.
Rumors of missing gentlemen could be heard for some time. They were strange cases, and some of the clues led to one place. However, many people were afraid to take any action against the rich and influential widow, who seemed to be showing an unhealthy fascination with more and more admirers. Since all those who disappeared without news came from distant places, it was impossible to discover the slightest connection to her that could explain these disappearances.
Without strong evidence, she could not be charged with anything. However, the officers promised the distraught woman that they would visit the suspect and speak to her about her missing lover. In May 1925, several Serbian police officers knocked on the door of the residence. After a short wait, Vera Renczi opened it and invited them inside. Before they had time to ask their first question, Vera addressed them with the calmness of an aristocrat.
Welcome, gentlemen. I knew you would visit me. Please, come in and follow me.
Ms. Renczi led the surprised law enforcement officers to a door leading to the basement. The policemen silently descended into the underground crypt. After walking down a long, dark corridor, they entered a large room. When they illuminated the space, a gruesome sight appeared before their eyes.
It was unbelievable. 35 zinc coffins arranged in a circle. In the center stood an armchair and a half-finished glass of wine. What was this supposed to be? It looked like a nightmarish theatrical staging.
In each of the coffins lay human corpses in various stages of decomposition. What the police officers saw was more than enough to arrest Vera Renczi. According to a correspondent from the American Weekly, however, during questioning, the woman denied having anything to do with the deaths of the people whose bodies she kept in her basement.
No other lives weigh on my conscience. The people I showed you were my relatives and friends. I cared for them when they were ill, and I chose to care for them after their deaths as well. Among them are also several townspeople who were killed when the army passed through. I gave them eternal rest.
The version of events presented by the widow did not convince the investigators, who decided to conduct a thorough examination of the dark crypt.
The Black Widow made our task easier. Next to each coffin was a plaque listing the name and age of the victim.
Meticulously, she had also noted the number of days each had spent by her side. Most of the deceased were adult men, except for one. the remains of a 10-year-old boy. His coffin bore the name Lorenzo. Among the victims were also 2 of Vera's former husbands. Analysis of the bodies left no doubt. All had been poisoned with arsenic, large quantities of which were found in the mansion. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Vera Renczi confessed to all the murders. She described in detail how she had poisoned her victims by adding arsenic to their food or wine. Some killed instantly, others slowly, through smaller, repeated doses.
My first husband drove me crazy with his adoration of other women. I couldn't bear the thought that he might look at someone else the way he once looked at me. When I felt I was losing him, I swore he would never belong to another woman. So I killed him.
Since then, a fear of loneliness and a consuming, morbid jealousy took over her mind. For Vera, everything revolved around control. Every betrayal, every hint of boredom, every threat to leave, real or imagined, became a death sentence. Some lovers died slowly, poisoned over time. Others were eliminated in a single dose. The method depended entirely on how much their behavior enraged her.
I needed to be with someone. I needed men. The more of them I had, the more I feared that any one of them might have someone else. If they didn't want to be with only me, I made sure they'd be with no one else.
Vera Renczi also confessed to murdering her own son. The reason she gave froze even the most hardened law enforcement officers. One day, young Lorenzo went down to the basement looking for his mother and found her surrounded by coffins. Too many coffins. Vera couldn't let her secret get out. She wouldn't take any chances.
He was terrified. I was afraid he would betray me, tell someone what he saw. And besides, he would grow up one day. He would leave me for another woman. I couldn't let that happen.
With disarming candor, Vera also recounted how she often descended into the basement, dressed in an elegant gown, to spend long hours surrounded by her men. Sipping red wine, she would talk to them, reminiscing about the wonderful moments when they had lived only for her. It didn't matter whether they were alive or dead. What mattered was that they would never leave her again, and never betray her.
The Black Widow of Bečkerek was sentenced to death by hanging, but Vera was spared the gallows by a change in Serbian law that prohibited the execution of women. Her sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. While serving her sentence, Vera began to show signs of mental illness. She claimed to see her victims. She would spend hours talking to her former lovers, professing her love, thanking them for being there. Sometimes she laughed, recalling moments of passion. Other times she shouted, accusing them of betrayal and hurt.
When she was diagnosed with schizophrenia, she was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. Just before the outbreak of World War II, Vera suffered a stroke and died at the age of 44. Later, rumors spread that Vera Renczi had survived the war and that she only joined her victims in death sometime around 1960. But those were only whispers, never confirmed.
The case of Vera Renczi made headlines not only in her native Serbia, but also overseas. American and Canadian newspapers competed with one another, publishing increasingly sensational versions of the story. Even before her trial, the Kingston Daily Freeman, a New York morning paper, ran a front-page article comparing Vera to the infamous daughter of Pope Alexander VI.
The bodies of the victims placed in zinc coffins and marked accordingly. A woman accused of killing 2 husbands, a son, and 32 other suitors. The world has created another Lucrezia Borgia, or perhaps a woman even more ruthless. This Borgia poisoned her husbands to improve her social standing. That is the opinion of European police investigating the strange case of Mrs. Renchi from Bečkerek, Serbia.
Not a single authentic photograph of the Black Widow has survived to this day. Although when you search her name on Google, a fake archival photo often appears, it's not really her. And that's a shame, because it's a completely different experience when you can see real archival images from the case. Today, even the official investigation and trial files are hard to come by. All records have been lost. The only surviving traces of the events can be found in a few sensational newspaper articles from the 1920s. Despite the scarce documentation, Vera Renczi is still remembered, especially in Romania, where she is considered the most infamous and deadly woman in the country's history. Dark File, Chilling True Stories.